No. 10 soldiers and Nixon's coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming for dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are gunning us down. Should have been done long ago. What if you knew her and found her dead on the ground? How can you run when you know? When you know? Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are gunning us down. Should have been done long ago. What if you knew her and found her dead on the ground? How can you run when you know? When you know? Ten soldiers and Nixon's coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming for dead in Ohio. 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 Oh, for in Ohio. For dead in Ohio. For dead in Ohio. For dead in Ohio. Oh, oh.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian Clash. We appreciate that. It's a sad song and it's a sad subject, but we appreciate it, your musical talents. And Train, thank you very much for hosting this meeting again. Welcome, everybody. This is Suzanne and Bob here with the second Free Press second Saturday Cyber-Salon here in May. And we decided to sit on our couch tonight because we can lean back and be a little bit more comfortable during the events. But yeah, so last month we had our first Cyber-Salon. It was pretty successful. A lot of people were on. There's Candy Watkins just tuning in. And we just wanted to emphasize that 2020 is the 50th anniversary of the Free Press. It started in October, and we plan to have a big celebration in October, and we're not sure that that's even going to be possible. So I thought during these Cyber-Salons at the beginning, we could talk a little bit about the history of the Free Press, and a little bit about the 50th anniversary, and something that me and Bob were not in on because he didn't live in Columbus and I was too young. But back in 1970, the some students and some other activists on OSU campus were inspired partly by the killings of Kent State to start up the Free Press newspaper as one of the first underground independent newspapers in the country, I think, in the OSU campus area. So Bob's going to talk a little bit about that now, and then we'll open it up for people that were also around during that time if they want to tell any of their stories, because clearly Bob and I were not involved in that.
And we can see Candy, well-known hippie, the prototype for the Columbus hippie. And again, your ads in the early pages of the Free Press, so looking forward to your contributions. And again, I think we need to keep in mind, I've written with Harvey Wasserman, been my co-conspirator, and I wrote the FBI and had him get a FOIA request
So some of you may have known that one of the great driving forces for the Kent State shootings was J. Edgar Hoover and Governor James Rhodes. And the FBI was in their own documents blackmailing Rhodes. He was a bookie, 1936 to 38. He essentially sold blue movies, porn movies to fraternities in the late 30s and was the numbers guy, Jimmy's Place down on Buttles. So, and the FBI knew about that, and they essentially, he worked for the mob. That's how he got put on the school board to steer contracts, later became the mayor, while he was still heavily involved in the numbers racket. And the FBI, in their own notes, argued that they understood it because Negroes like to gamble, and Black people wouldn't vote for him. So yeah, that was their actual analysis. And they encouraged him to crack down heavily on the student hippies. You may recall COINTELPRO, counterintelligence. There was an ongoing FBI secret project from 56 up to 74 that targeted the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, and all the peace movements in the United States. And we were lucky to have the underground press here. I was in Detroit. We also had what is arguably the earliest paper, the Fifth Estate, which really were crazed, pot-smoking anarchists around John Sinclair, who was the manager, of course, of the MC5. So in 1970, the Free Press, following Kent State, remember 10 days later was Jackson State College, where two Blacks were shot and killed by the local police. The President's Commission said 150 rounds were shot. The FBI says 400, and that was precipitated. The police later claimed they were looking for a sniper, but the original call shows it was loud music in the dorms, and the dorms were sprayed with automatic weapons. So again, and this was brought on by Cambodia, right? The attack on this neutral little Buddhist country, which later led to the killing fields as the US and China backed, again, the Khmer Rouge mass murderers. So all of these things are happening in 1970s, and particularly in beginning in 1970 with the Free Press. Within 2 years later, of course, the Freep was one of the original people involved in the community festival. With that in mind, again, yeah, Suzanne has reminded me to mention the OSU riots, the longest riots in the history of any university in America, Ohio State University, which has gone out of his way not to claim that role, right? The Ohio State. There was a great film put together about 20 minutes long by the now defunct film department on the OSU riots. But again, 10 people were shot during the OSU riots. Nobody died, but they went on, for 2 weeks straight, and they called off spring term. So with that in mind, and again, we also know 2 of the 4 people who closed the gate happened to be police infiltrators. And you may know up at Kent State, the security forces at the school told the media what time the ROTC building was going to burn. And the students weren't good at burning stuff. They were using matches on hardwood. But luckily, a biker showed up with gasoline and gave it to a high school dropout. And luckily, that guy was thought to be an FBI snitch or agent provocateur. But yeah, the burning of the ROTC building couldn't be done. Matches against Ohio hardwood simply didn't work. Thank God an FBI snitch was there on a motorcycle with gasoline to make sure it went off as planned. So with that in mind, those of you who are around in Ohio in 1970. Candy, maybe you'd like to start. Go ahead and tell us some of your memories.
Unmute. Okay, I had to unmute. Can you hear me? But I can't hear you anymore.
Yeah, we muted ourselves, but yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you.
I was in a cultural position, not necessarily a political one. I was talking to Suzanne about it. I was a merchant and an artist. And so I viewed it from a different perspective. However, we were still not, we were not as radical as some and not as unradical as others. We sort of were right in the middle. When the riots broke out, Pearl Alley was, of course, right in the center of it because it was at 13th and High. I remember sitting on the roof, watching things go on, taunting the police who couldn't get to us, which wasn't fair. I remember a police cruiser being stuck on a pile of bricks in the middle of the street, and we used to use my car to drive injured people in and out of the area because we would drive right down Pearl Alley and head to Framby's Avenue. We drove my car until it was riding on the rims. I think the last trip we rode it on the rims with people. They were getting hit with rock salt, and I don't know if they were using rubber bullets, but the rock salt was doing a lot of damage to people. And the gas was doing a tremendous amount of damage. From my perspective, I was saddened by seeing people I knew on the other side. To walk up to a guardsman, and that guardsman is somebody that we went to school with, was a more devastating thing to me, to see the polarization, I guess, culturally. Who else is with us? Hello?
Harvey.
Hi, Harvey.
How you doing, Candy?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. I'm talking to you from California, but I remember I was not in Ohio when Kent State happened. I do remember the early free press issues. There was a free press issue that showed John Mitchell, the Attorney General of the United States, smoking a reefer. That was really good. I liked that a lot. And Kent State was meant to send a message, you know, to the young people, to the students, and to the opponents of the war in Southeast Asia, that they would kill us, and they did, and you know, they
More
killed
than once.
at Jackson State. It was not an accident. I think Bob has been instrumental in showing that there was actually an order given to open fire. You know, the official line has been that there was a shot fired and nobody knows where it came from, and the guardsmen who were inexplicably carrying live ammunition. I mean, why do you send the National Guard to a student protest that's nonviolent and give the National Guard live ammunition? You know, unless you wanted to really send a message, that's what it was all about. It was a horrible tragedy, and you know, we persisted. It did not stop the demonstrations against the war. Certainly didn't stop the free press. But
It polarized everybody.
yeah, you know, it made it very clear that Nixon wanted to be a dictator. He actually looked into there was a study done called the Houston Plan to see about calling off the 1972 elections. And they didn't do that, but you know, how we wind up 50 years later with Donald Trump is beyond me. But that's what we're up against now. But the free press has been an integral part of it, and of the resistance, and it was great. There was a guy. We should pay respects to Dwayne Yeager. The free press started in 1970, and it was, you know, had a life, and then like much else on the left, by 1980, it was kind of played out. But Dwayne Yeager, God love him, I don't know where he is now, came in and he carried the Free Press for years, you know, just pretty much on his back. And then finally, Bob showed up in town. What was that, 89, Bob? And
87.
87, and Dwayne said, "Here, man, take it." And you did.
Manning Mirabal, the black historian, was at OSU. And I asked him where the left was. He mentioned you. He said, well, how do you live? And he goes, yeah, if you want to, you ought to take over the Free Press. It's the only progressive left voice in town. And Dwayne had the same idea.
Well, except for the Dispatch, of course.
So is there anybody else that's tuned in with us that was around during that time that wants to say some words? I know that somebody was, Lynn Stan, and somebody was promoting somebody named Ernst that I'm not familiar with, but I see that he's on. Did you want to say some words? Tell some stories? Are you able to talk?
He's muted.
Hi, Ernst. Where's Ernst?
Ernst, can you unmute?
Unmute him.
Down in the left-hand corner on the bottom of your screen, Ernst. Ernst was doing photographs for local and national publications at the time, and so from a journalist perspective, he was right in the middle of it.
I'll see if we can get him unmuted.
He is definitely unmuted.
Let Ernest speak.
Where is he?
He's right there.
There you are.
Hey.
Oh, now you're muted again.
Unmute.
I don't know why. His mic is hot on my end. Something on his end is not working. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Ernst.
He's hearing us say it.
I can talk for a while he's trying to do that.
Okay.
Candy happened to mention that they might have used rubber bullets. Actually, they didn't. They used these wooden pellets shot out of these things.
Hey.
We called them knee knockers, and the idea was that they were supposed to shoot them down at the ground, and then they would hop up off the ground and hit us in the knee and disperse the crowd. But of course, some people got shot in the face with them and other parts of the body.
Right.
So,
It's horrible.
People got really hurt. People got injured with no way to get medical attention. A lot of first aid. A lot of people were doing a lot of first aid.
a little bit insulted by what you said Manning Mirabal said in the 80s, because I was in Columbus from 64 to 89, and I was always politically active, and part of the left never ended.
Well, I think he was talking more about an institution that he thought I should hook up with. I mean, at the time, I was one of the founders of Disco, as well as DSOC, and there were clearly other left-wing groups in the city.
Yeah,
but it was his recommendations. We know there were, and at Wayne State there were 40 different groups when I was up there. 38 were Trotskyists, though.
Yeah, well, I never was a Trotskyist, but I started out being in Students for Liberal Action, and then moved to the Boys Club, and then a few months in the first SDS that was there, and then dropped out of that, and then was in some of the SDSers that came down from Kent State and started a Weatherman type SDS, and then I dropped out of that and a few other people in town, we started our own local thing called Third World Solidarity Committee, and we went on to play an important leadership role in the strike itself. I was actually arrested 6 times in Columbus between 1969 and 1972. And also was kicked off a campus, banned from campus, then eventually came back and got my undergraduate degree and then my master's and my PhD at Ohio State. So they didn't, they let some of us radicals back up. So, and then after Third World Solidarity Committee, then jumped to the other side of SDS, Workers Student Alliance, and then
Oh, yeah.
International Committee Against Racism and Workers' Action Movement and Progressive Labor Party, and I've been through all of that. So at the
It sounds like you were in a fair amount of them. So again, Manning's dead now. I correct him. So he was only here 1 year. Probably a better historian than he was on the culture of the grassroots left, which you seem to know a lot of the history. So incredibly interesting. Anyone else?
Did we ever get Ernst on?
Good question.
I don't know about his audio.
Is he unmuted?
He is unmuted, but
Speakers,
he's trying to use, I think, his telephone microphone. You can see in his video.
I'm using mine, works fine.
Yeah.
Still can't hear Ernst.
Ernst, there's a phone number in the invite. If you can hear us, maybe you can call that phone number.
Okay, we want to hear from you. We're this close to blaming it on counter-revolutionaries. Anyone else with any other reflections on?
there was another underground paper before the Free Press called Purple Berries.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Wasn't that Steve Conliffe associated with that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I tagged Steve, tried to get him on here.
I remember I had very little to do with the Free Press, but I did, since I was into technology quite a bit, when the Free Press moved to trying to do things with a computer. I forget who it was at the time, but they asked me over to help advise them on this Radio Shack computer they were working with.
Oh, I think that was probably Dwayne Jagger, right?
I don't think so.
Or Quigley?
Or
who else?
Quigley.
Quigley, the lawyer.
Yeah, he before
Don Quigley.
Mm-hmm.
I know this was another guy, maybe names another Steve.
Oh, it's Conliffe?
No.
I invited Susie too. I was hoping she'd show up.
Well, we actually inherited that. That's the one we had to load the hard drive. When we first took over the paper in the early 90s, Mary Jo Kilroy and I, we were stuck with this older, again, Radio Shack, massive hard drive had to be loaded.
Where did Libby fit into all of this with you guys?
Not
Libby Gregory?
I mean, I could call him, but then.
Libby and John were, partners there and running the paper, and she was editing it for a long period of time prior to Dwayne Jagger.
Wasn't she also a store owner with a partner with a store?
Yeah,
Right, and Trade Winds.
Trade Winds.
Yeah, because
And that's where the paper was for a long time.
she
Right.
would even let me sell Progressive Labor Party's paper in Trade Winds.
Wasn't there a paper before that also?
Got it.
There was called The
Give me
People
one.
Yes.
That was the other one. Those were the two predecessors.
Hey, Train, can you give Ernst the phone number? He's looking for the phone number.
Yeah, I'm working on that right now. I'm trying
Okay.
to find it.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No.
May I tell a quick story of the Free Press office being above Trade Winds? And one particular month, we were doing typesetting, and the typesetting started smoking or catching fire. And we had to switch to using a dot matrix printer to lay out the paper. That paper was the strangest looking paper.
Oh, I remember that.
I can imagine.
There's Chris
I
Ryan.
also remember a woman who'd smoked a lot of marijuana who could not spell the word Nicaragua.
No.
with the headline printer.
No.
She kept, it was one of these things where you moved plastic strips and you'd expose
Right.
each single letter of the word separately. And so she kept not remembering or whatever. and she, I don't know, I suppose she
I don't
eventually
want.
moved to Nicaragua, but that was a long time ago.
All right.
So Ernst now has the phone number. Maybe he can try to call. I don't know if you see that in the chat.
And
I hope so.
yeah,
He's
anyone
really-
else? I see Chris the Anarchist, who in
Hello.
1980 we met at the Republican convention. And were any of you at some of the great battles at Kent State? 1980s, I know the Yippies played a tremendous role in trying to tear down the gym.
Well, actually, that move the gym stuff happened in the late 70s before I actually was involved in Yippee. I was aware of that stuff. Oddly enough, the day that Steve Conliffe pied Rhodes was also the very same day that I got my discharge from the Army. I remember walking out to the airport concourse in Seattle, Washington that morning after I got my discharge and listening to the story about Conliffe pieing Governor Rhodes and thinking to myself, gee whiz, you know, it'd be really neat to meet that guy sometime. Little did I know that, like, you know, in a couple, 3 years from that date, that he and I would be like virtually partners.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Right, anyone else on Kent State?
I think Ernst is looking for the Zoom call-in number, and somebody gave him our home phone number. So he needs the Zoom call-in number trained.
Sorry, I thought that was it. I'm gonna try to find it again.
What happened with Ernst? Did we ever get him?
I got him on the phone right now.
Can he speak on the speaker?
I don't know if you guys
Yeah,
can.
just stick the phone in front of the microphone.
Talk loud, Ernest.
It's Ernst.
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 I don't know that it's going to be able to pick up here.
Oh, we're having trouble picking you up. They're going to send you one. There's a groundswell.
A groundswell.
Free Ernst. Let Ernst speak.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi there.
It could be like the free speech movement out of Berkeley. Ernst, speak.
Well, there's a good story about Steve Conliffe you could tell about James Rhodes, right?
Oh, it was mentioned by Chris the Egg, the pieing. Anyone there are familiar with the pieing events?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
My favorite part was from a legal perspective because it was Giddis and I forget who else was involved in that.
Sandy Stater, Fred Giddis.
But they brought in expert witnesses. They tied a bunch of people. And then to prove that no damage really.
Right, right.
Didn't they have Pete Howerson take their vitals and make sure that
Right.
they were okay?
Yes, afterwards, yeah.
I mean, the lawyers were great. I mean, we should have tagged the lawyers here. We should have tagged Fred and Barb. You know, they were great back then. I mean, they're still great, doing great work, but.
You edit it, and it doesn't look.
Well, Sandy actually sued on behalf of Margaret, saying that she was raped by a pig because her common law husband turned out to be a snitch for the FBI.
And he's referring to the most radical free press editor.
You're shitting me.
Our little Margaret, yes.
Yeah, and
we should mention Margaret. I mean, that's a sad thing.
I would like to have a whole separate event that's a memorial tribute to Margaret on Zoom, so we won't spend this salon doing that, but it could last for a whole funerals, memorial service.
And we could invite a bunch of different people, right?
Yeah. Right. I know Colin Nyberger and people are still kind of on Facebook. So while we're waiting for Ernst to get a phone number, Mark Stansberry, do you want to go through your presentation?
Sorry, Mark, I just ended your presentation, but go ahead and put it back up again.
I'm not very good at it, so yeah, I'm hoping you can help me, Train.
Okay.
Well, if you want Train to click through it, you can. While you talk, you can just say.
Then I would like Chet to jump on because a lot of these are movie pictures he shared. But the one I wanted to show you, talking about Margaret, is the
Ready to Incite Reality. Was a group of young folks that were involved right then in the 70s, and they were arrested back in the March action. So, you know, everybody talks about Kent State. Kent State stuff didn't happen until like April 30th.
Right.
May Day, near May Day. Ohio State had started way early because of a lot of ongoing organizing that had been going on, particularly around Black studies and women's studies. And that emphasis, the anti-war matrix or engine began to coalesce with those groups, and those three sectors pretty much brought thousands of people out onto the Oval. I remember when I was young, you could drive around the Oval. Everybody remember that?
Me too. I remember that.
You could drive on from 15th and High. You could go right in and be right there. I remember stopping many times, waiting for my dad right at 15th and High, because he would meet us at Mershon and be able to turn around right there and get gone from campus area, because he was up there at 71. That was right after all that explosion. So, Train, you got that stuff up yet? Or should I hit it? I don't know. Let's see.
I'm sorry. I was going to let you take over. Go ahead.
This, let's see. Is this showing full screen?
Sure.
I can't,
yeah, but I think you have to hit present so that we don't see your notes and your slide from the side. There you go. Arrow key to control.
All right. I stole a think about oh, just a second. Let me not. I'm inside my phone. Oh, no. What's going on? My bad. Okay. But anyway. All right, am I echoing?
Yes.
You may. Let's see. This thing. Let me try to get off this.
Turn your computer's audio off.
Yeah.
Now we lost your audio. You muted yourself.
There we go. Am I good now?
Yes.
Here's the phone stuff.
So, yeah, this was earlier. I was saying that was the presentation on indigenous peoples and the fact that COVID is happening. So we're dealing with COVID. For me, I was starting to write an article for the Free Press on spring 1970 and spring 2020 being shut down. 2020 and 1970 were springs that have been shut down. And one aspect, one leader of that time was the National Guard. They're out now, and they were back then for different reasons, but I just wanted to share that. So here's this on trial for inciting reality. And Chet is the one down in the middle next to Margaret. You see Margaret with her always bright, sterling eyes, looking straight at you, very committed to being ready to go right then, right? She was always ready to go. Let's do this now. Chet's the one sitting right next to her. These are the folks that were put on trial, some of them, most of them, for actions that happened back in March, I think 12th or 13th. Chet, are you on? Can you give me exact dates on that?
No, actually, it's just a blur to me since I was arrested 10 different times.
Okay. All right. But anyways, this was right around the time and they were inciting us to reality, right? So we're dealing with COVID. This is starting to focus on some indigenous impacts, but it's not a new thing. It's not a new thing. This is an issue that's been going on for years. 150 years of Canadian attacks on First Nations, and it goes on even in the United States even longer. And these are all the treaties that were signed and ignored. So, we continue to be a group of people that are either ostracized, ignored, or whatever. Okay, here's So some of the women, particularly white women, were starting to take leadership at this moment in the movement. And Karen on the left side is one of the leaders that was starting to read. And if you can remember, that's in front of Bricker, right? Everybody recognized Bricker. She was reading some demands that were part of that demonstration. Thousands of people are there listening to her. Chet, do you have any more? Art Flesh and
we were a couple, Karen and I. And
yeah.
If the picture was bigger, you'd see me right behind her.
Yep.
She was reading the women's demands that day.
Yeah. And so can you give any, do you remember a little bit about what that was going on?
That particular day, yeah, that was just beginnings of the strike when people were really starting to pay attention to us. Just a few months before that, like maybe January, I know we Third World called a rally.
Yep.
Against her, and about 15 people showed up, about that many ROTC students, and they beat the heck out of some of the protesters. I remember I had one of those little things you would use to shoot tear gas if somebody would attack you, that would make a loud bang. The ROTC student was beating up one of the demonstrators so much, so I just took that and shot it in his face, and it sounded like a bullet, and everybody just stopped. And anyway, it went from that then to just everything all came together from all the different movements at one time. And then by this time, this is early in the strike when we had a lot of our demands together. We prioritized them by having the so-called black demands first, and then it was the women's demands, and then finally down at the bottom was this male white radical anti-war demands. Of course, there's overlap between all that, but I'm just saying that that's the way we approached that at the time.
Yeah. So here we are, we're getting back to 1917, 18 flus of how it impacted the indigenous people. I have all this presentation if you'd like to see it. I'm just going to flow through it. 11 treaties between 1871 and 1921, all broken. And then now we're starting to look at some of the third world leadership that was in charge. And one of our favorites, ongoing and still is, Roger Berto, is speaking in front of thousands of people, a member and representing the AFAM. Is the left picture, and then on the right side, is where the military started taking charge of 15th and High. If you remember, that's 15th and High, and they just shut it down. Anybody that was around at that point would remember that. It was very important. The one down below is from the 80s when we started taking the Board of Trustees. And so this is part of what we're trying to put together is a 50-plus year student rebellion piece that we planned to do it in April, but we're going to move it to September. So we're trying to work on that. But this was an attack, or not an attack, an action on the Board of Trustees when they refused to divest from South Africa. So student activism has been going on in Columbus for many, many decades, and many times before 70s, but especially since 1970. And 1970 is definitely a marker. I mean, as you've already mentioned, Bob, the Free Press, ComFest, all those significant cultural events and emotions that are part of our society, our society, Columbus, Ohio, is definitely resultant of 1970s. So there's a little bit of that. That's indigenous, more indigenous. And then we got some pictures here. Roger, a little older. That was from probably the end of 80s, 90s. It looks like the 90s, or maybe even 2000s when we had the action against the Iraq War, the most recent war. 1970, I'm just bringing some of these pictures up. Crandall down on the bottom left, Bill Crandall was part of the Vietnam Veterans Against War. He had went to war and had come back and was very much against. And you can see the numbers of people that are on the oval. Very intense, very intense. some of the folks from the liberation of you probably can recognize Roger in the middle there, right above the T, Roger Doyle, and some other folks that we probably know, some very good friends, I'm sure, that have passed on. Friedman is back in the middle there. Some names that we haven't spoken.
Quigley and Nyberger over there on the right.
Where? Who?
Quigley, John Quigley and Colin Nyberger are the two on the right bottom.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
yeah, I recognize a lot of those people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great picture. And then the top one is from a 1970 action when they took over. There's not even a Sherman Street on campus anymore, I don't think. Did anybody find that anymore? I think some of that Sherman was taken over by some of the building that was added on. But that's back towards where the Arts Sciences convention or library is over there. You can see it. So this is like 17th, 16th, 17th Avenue where they had occupied. And so this was a common strategy back then, was to take over intersections, to block off, and to not do it in one location, but do it to many locations, and really force the police's ability to control the grouping. This was from April 29th, where they're at 17th and Sherman. The one in the top there, up top, is in Vietnam itself. It's when the Vietnam, Northern Vietnamese Army came into Saigon. Very much support was exhibited at that point. This was near 75, 76. So, you know, it wasn't as though the war, you know, they look at it as U.S. war. We look at it as Vietnam War. How do we describe things? Language, always one thing women's movement has told us and has taught us for the years, is language is very important. So how we define what that war was is a lot of how we frame our whole political, our whole global view. Again, I was speaking about the action we're going to do. This is from the flyer that we had already designed and ready to go, but we're going to move it to September. So just save a date. I was trying to get someone to move all that April dates out of there and save the date. Just remember, it's going to be like this, probably late Labor Day week. That Labor Day week, we'll probably try to get it going. Top right is a game in 75, North and South Vietnam playing soccer. Right after the war, they're ready to play soccer. So it's not like they have long time divisions. And then the action down there, I can't quite tell where that one is, but I think that one is up at Kent itself during the strike. And then you saw Karen reading some demands. These are demands from 1970, April 24th. So again, people always want to limit their discussion of Kent State. We right away want to make sure that we understood Columbus, as well as Ohio State, was very much involved in an anti-war, pro-people's movement, much before the catastrophic tragedy that happened up at Kent State, and then Jackson State, and then also down in Arkansas, where they killed some people just out on the streets, indiscriminately shot into the crowd, particularly African-American. So, you know, the demands, you look at them, look at the demands. They could be written today. They really could be. And then the one on the far right is sort of an appeal for the folks that were under trial at that point. This sort of ends what I have at this point. If anybody else have anything they want to say or talk about, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mark.
I just wanted to, yeah.
I think Ernst might have come on. We're going to try him one more time.
Good. I'm going to turn this off.
Okay, can anybody hear me?
Presentation, Mark.
Yeah, we could hear you. If that was Ernst talking, we could hear you.
No, that was me.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's through the mic or the phone.
Who is speaking?
This is Ernst.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
we can hear you.
We
Just
can hear
speak
you.
up a little. We can hear you.
Okay. It's got an echo here.
Do you have two things going on at the same time? Two phones or two devices?
I may have got the mic working. let me, can you still hear me?
We can still hear you. It's great.
Yeah, just talk. There's not much of an echo.
Go ahead and talk, Ernst.
Okay, let me.
Whoops, that was an echo.
Okay, I think I've got the microphone on.
Sounds perfect.
Yay. Sort of strange talking to myself. Anyway, I was there I was doing photography for the Lantern on both winter and spring quarter. So I showed up in a lot of places and got some of the early demonstrations. Most of my negatives were kept by the Lantern. They had a policy of you'd hand in your film and it'd go in the school archives. But after early May, I started keeping some of the negatives. And then I was also shooting some color slides and sending them off to New York to Newsweek. And Candy's seen some of them and they've been on Facebook. If I can, let me see, well, if you want to see some images, some of you are probably in them.
Yeah, you can share your screen with that button.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let's see which screen it shares.
You get
one
two.
of the pictures that was just shown, the one of Roger, you took it. Your signature was on it.
Yeah. I also took the one of Bill. Let's see what comes up.
We're looking at the Lightroom catalog.
Oh, okay. Let's do a color one here. This is one I'm not quite, they were pelting the administration building with marshmallows and groveling in front. And that's all I remember from the photo, other than it was late April, real early May.
Ernst, it was a grovel in because of the way the administration was treating us, and they were saying that all of the people involved were outside agitators.
Okay.
So, Roger and me and some other people, we sat in front of 1,000, like all those people behind there, to show and held up our ID cards, student ID cards, to show that it was actual students that were taking part.
Okay,
I think
like
the
right
Yippies
there.
were responsible for calling it the grovel in.
Okay. This one was, I think, the day after Kent State. You'll notice the headline on the newspaper. But mostly, and these are a little bit random.
The woman with the red fist, she was one of the leaders of the coalition also.
This is just one of my favorites. It sort of set the tone in that the National Guard, they hadn't a clue what the university was about. And they weren't always sure how to react. When I'm looking for, well, let's just go through some of these. And, you know, it was early on, you could bring your kid. There was no violence. But then, let's see, there we go. When they closed the gates, it kind of got the highway patrol all pissed off. And I'm not sure, one or two of these were working undercover for the police. And they instigated a lot of closing the fence, which led to some of this. A lot of this. You notice the guy's pistol over here? There were a number of them who had pistols just sort of hanging in their pockets in plain clothes.
Yeah, two of the four in the official reports were working for the police. And others, you're absolutely right, were ready to go and had guns and were prepared to make the arrest. This was supposedly going to decapitate the movement.
About a month later, the FBI tracked me down for an interview. It was totally bizarre. Here's still on Neal Avenue after the gates. This was actually after they closed down the campus. If I'd had more time, I could have put these in a coherent order. But it sort of gives, and you had some similar to this, of people trying to have a dialogue. Because the National Guard was the same age as us. They simply came from different backgrounds. And they weren't really sure what was going on. And yes, there were giant crowds.
That was Lorraine Cohen. She was one of the leaders also of the coalition.
Yeah. And I found this interesting, of people wandering around with weapons. This shot, it was early on, and they sent a New York Times reporter out. And so he and I set out in the early morning, and all was quiet. The National Guard was on one end, and everything was sunny and bright. And then classes changed. And if you remember at that point, all the classes changed at the same time. So you'd have thousands of people on the Oval. And they came out to change classes, and the police and the highway patrol and the National Guard just went bananas. They started tossing tear gas, trying to herd people up. The New York Times reporter was just flabbergasted. He kept saying he'd never seen anything like this. And that's one of my neighbors now. But they just sort of started coming through, tossing tear gas, as you can see. And most people didn't know, but early on, I went up and talked to the National Guard general, and they were all armed. They had lots of ammunition in the magazines ready to load at any time. This was earlier on down the ROTC thing.
Yeah, that's Steve Abbott holding the bullhorn. He worked with the Free Press.
Yeah. And he's still around somewhere. And the ROTC was doing something. Of course, they had a band and bagpipes, but this is back on the Oval, which was it was totally insane. There were some people with armbands, if I remember right, who were trying to be peacekeepers to keep anything from getting too bad. It didn't work. And a lot of people were just walking across the Oval and said the same thing. And then, of course, this is High Street. I don't know who he is. Anybody know who he is?
He's one of the leaders of Afro-Am. I'm not sure about the name.
And oh, there it goes, it's loading. This was about May 3rd, May 4th. It's when they were trying to shut it down. This again from early May. They were very ready with the rifle butts and the bayonets, but so much of it, they weren't thoroughly organized, but mostly it was such a cultural clash. Oh, Woody Hayes. He actually showed up one day. And I don't remember what he talked about, but I was amazed he actually showed up to talk.
Yeah, I was in charge of the microphone that day, and I got in a fight with 4 or 5 of his defensive linemen over whether or not we were going to let him speak. The leaders of the coalition didn't want to let him speak. I did, because I thought he'd make a fool of himself. But anyway, I was able to keep him from speaking by hiding the microphone cable for a while. And then we decided to let him speak. And sure enough, he talked about us all working together and making a touchdown together. I'm not lying. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was intriguing. An old friend of mine who would like to do signs. Yeah, it's a nice shot. I like that. Anyway, that's sort of where I was for, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in there. I had a friend shot by the sheriff. He was a ex-Marine, Vietnam vet. He was walking to class and they shot him in the knee. It could have been Kent State and then some, just because of the number of students who were out at any one time.
Yeah, I remember one person was bayoneted too.
Yes, the Army was always big on the spirit of the bayonet. Tom Paxton has an interesting song about it. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing. That's some of my images I was able to share and save. I've got others that are just sort of scattered groups of people. These are a little more focused. So.
Thank you so much, Ernst. We really appreciate it. That is fascinating.
Oh, sure.
Let's say, Ernst, you might be able to help me. I have over 400 pictures myself. I did not take them, but you might be able to help me track down who did. So when things settled down that summer, I decided I was going to make a photo book of the whole thing. And I ran onto a photographer that had over 400 pictures, and he gave me his contact sheets and negatives because he didn't have time to develop them. And then I forgot his name over the years, and those are those pictures that I'm sharing with Mark now. And you didn't happen to run onto somebody that was, I mean, some of his pictures are like he must have been standing next to you. You don't know. When you first started speaking, I was hoping it was you, and I was going to be able to return these to you. But okay, I'm sorry to interrupt with something like that, but thank you.
That's okay. Yeah. Also, the Lantern has an online archive that you can search by name for photographers or by date for individual pages. And although typically a photographer wants their name on the photo, there towards the end of the riots, we all got a little gun shy. I still remember how the National Guard leaders, the Highway Patrol, their police force, they all seemed to know me by name after about 3 days. And I never figured out if that was good or bad. But then also, you know, Cohen and the others knew me, and a lot of the Black Panther group knew me. So anyway, yeah, I'd like to help you out. I'd like to see the images.
Yeah, well, I'm working with Mark to do a presentation and show him most of those. Also, I was standing a few feet one time during this, a few feet from a Citizen Journal reporter, I think it was, instead of Dispatch. And the police sprayed tear gas in his eyes, and he was holding up his press card right when they were done.
Yeah,
that was at 15th and High. I remember it today.
They were willing to arrest or grab or tear gas anybody. Some of the Lantern photographers also had press IDs, and they knew who they were, and they busted them anyway. Grabbed them, roughed them up a little bit, hauled them off. I was fairly lucky. Just a lot of tear gas.
Does anybody know who made a short independent film about what happened on the OSU campus? Because there used to be a copy of it at Columbus State Community College when Bob got the job there, and he would play it in his politics classes. And he can't remember the name of it, but it had to have been made by somebody
Oh, it was
local.
simply called the OSU riots. But they actually had footage. Some of it came from the Red Squad file from the state police who were filming there.
And then the film disappeared. It's like somebody took it. And so now we've never been able to track it back down.
But yeah, it came out of the film department, now defunct, at OSU. But it was Red Squad footage.
Huh.
It'd be nice.
And interviews. Yeah.
It'd be great to put all the photos and any video anybody has and all their memories together in one great big, Columbus piece on the activism that was happening back then. I would really love to see that happen. But thanks everybody for your contributions. It's about 8 o'clock and we were going to shift to our next subject where we have Harvey Wasserman and Kathy Cohen-Becker. And we were inspired to bring this to people's attention. If anybody had heard about or seen the film that Jeff Gibbs made in conjunction with Michael Moore called Planet of the Humans. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I don't know, Train, were you going to be able to play the trailer for it? Or if not, I can just describe it a little bit, or Bob could help. But it is a indictment of the renewable energy movement of people who are for solar and wind power. And you wouldn't think that Michael Moore would put out a movie like that, but there's been a lot of controversy about it, people writing about it online. Our own Columbus's Kathy Cohen-Becker got an article published about it, not only in the Free Press, but other places. And a man in Britain, or I guess he put together a half an hour long film that just rebuts everything they say in this film. But if anybody's seen it, it seems to make the case that there is that the solar energy field, the industry, and the wind industry are not worth it. They're not really ever going to be a sustainable source of energy for our planet. And it really only comes to the conclusion that these are not good options and everybody just needs to quit using so much energy.
Yeah.
So,
I have it if you'd want me to play that.
yeah, why don't you go ahead and
why
play
don't you
that?
play? And again, Harvey and I go back, I go back a long way with Michael. In fact, I was in the commune that taught him how to make video back in 78 when he was editor of the Flint Voice when I was in Detroit. But he also, it was great on Video the Vote in 2004. He worked with me and Harvey on getting all the video footage of the long lines, which were later denied. So we were quite shocked because of our long history with Michael Moore. So go ahead, Trey.
Okay. Hold on. Thank you for your patience. And share.
The solutions are out there.
There's no turning back.
I don't think the people in charge are near nervous enough.
I don't know if there was supposed to be sound during that, but we didn't hear anything. But that's okay. You get the idea that it's about climate change and solutions for that. And Harvey, I don't know, Harvey, if you're ready to go, or Kathy.
Yeah, I can go unless I can start talking about it real quick, and then
Okay.
Who's going to follow me?
Kathy Cohen-Becker.
Kathy?
Yeah, I can go
Kathy,
after
is it
you
all right
go.
with you if I go first?
Absolutely, please do.
I think that we were intending it to be kind of a dialogue between you two instead of one presentation and another. So Kathy, if you want to pop in, if Harvey, you can
right.
just take
Well,
turns.
let me start. I'll give you a summary. I've seen the movie, and of course I know Michael not as well as Bob, but the film is inexplicable. It's a mess. It's really boring. It's amazing how wrong they can get stuff that's really easily accessible. So the film basically says a number of things. It's a very depressing film, and it offers no hope and no alternatives and nothing that activists can do. It's just a big blob of negativity. The first thing they get into is population. And, you know, the standard argument, there are too many people. Now, I have my own take on that, but you can argue that there is an overpopulation problem and that I'm writing right now about the influenza epidemic of 1918. And exactly a century ago, there were about 1.8 million people on Earth. And now there's 7.8 billion people on Earth. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, they go through the whole overpopulation thing and they offer no solution. And there's one basic solution to the question of population, which is female empowerment, matriarchy. Overpopulation is a symptom of male domination. Wherever women are educated and have their freedom and access to income and access to reproductive choice, population plummets. And it's a very simple solution. You know, if patriarchy were replaced by matriarchy, we wouldn't have a population problem. Even in Catholic countries, when women are educated and empowered and have income, population drops. Women in general just don't want that many children. That's the bottom line. But this film never talks about that. All it talks about is how terrible overpopulation is, and then it moves on. It's ridiculous. Second point, about half the film is devoted to biofuels, the industry where they do cut down forests and they burn them for fuel. Now, I've been in the environmental movement actively since 1973, primarily in the energy side, stopping nuclear power and promoting renewable energy. I have not met anybody who's in favor of the technologies that they were putting down. They're showing forests being cut, large numbers of trees going into burners. Nobody supports that. We all oppose that. They show Bill McKibben supporting it, and they do this a lot in the film. They use footage that's like 10 or 15 years old. And Bill McKibben, who's a pioneer in fighting global warming, has long since changed his mind. Now, at the end of the film, they say that when Bill McKibben saw this, and they're really nasty to him, they really put him down in the movie. And I don't know him. I hear he's a nice guy, but it's not a big issue to me. He wrote a piece defending himself in Rolling Stone, so good for him. But they used footage of him supporting this biofuel technology from 10 or 15 years ago. And then they claim that when he saw the film, he changed his mind and came out against biofuels. That's wrong. It's a lie. He came out against biofuels a long time ago. It's just bullshit. It's ridiculous and completely nasty and uncalled for. Then the main part of the film is a put down on wind and solar. And I'll let Kathy talk about this, but basically everything that they say is technologically and provably wrong. It's every easily checked, verified technological assertions that they make about wind and solar, just flat out erroneous. In one case, they showed a solar array in the desert, and I was actually there. I did a piece, it's called the Solar Energy Generating Station, and it's parabolic trough mirrors, where you have a mirror that's curved, and then you have a tube, and the sunlight focuses on the tube, and you have oil or water in there, and does a heat transfer. And I went there in the 80s, and I wrote an article about it, and they did use natural gas to fire it up to get it going, and then through the day, it's all solar. And so they put down the technology because it used gas. But then they went to the site where this place was, and it was abandoned. And they did this whole big thing about how surprised they were and what a mess it was and a total failure. And it's completely, this is unbelievable. It's completely dishonest and knowably dishonest. What happened was this place operated for 30 years and it was successful. And then they tore it down to replace it with updated technology. And these two guys, these clowns, Jeff and Ozzy, go there between the time they tore down the old one and the time they put up the new one. And they said, oh, look, it's a disaster. It's a failure. They totally wrecked the place. And they interviewed a woman who knew absolutely nothing about what was going on. And they never mentioned that since then, but before the film came out, they replaced the whole thing and put up new technology that does not burn gas. I mean, it's like, you know, a triumph for the will. It's completely dishonest. Why Michael Moore, and there are at least 6 other incidents in the film, they show abandoned windmills. I mean, come on. You know, they show 6 abandoned windmills. Wind technology in the world today is approaching $1 trillion. It's an incredibly successful industry. They never once showed offshore wind power, which is incredibly profitable and incredibly successful and does not have particular environmental damage. They have completely erroneous discussions about how solar panels are made. I mean, just flat out cringeworthy wrong. And they make assertions about how coal is used and all this other stuff. It's just flat out incorrect. And in the entire film, they never show rooftop solar, which is incredibly successful. And they never show offshore wind power, which is also incredibly successful. Why Michael Moore did this is beyond me. I mean, the number, they don't use hard numbers. They use completely false stuff. It's really Bush League. And it will not hurt the renewable energy industry, because anybody who knows anything about renewables, especially wind and solar, know that they're completely on a takeoff curve. I mean, just beyond successful. Wind and solar are probably in many ways the 2 most successful technological innovations in human history. And I could have made a film putting down solar and wind in certain aspects that would have been, you know, technologically sound. They didn't come close. Nothing they said in this film about wind and solar has any scientific basis. And to have Michael Moore sign on this, I mean, it's ridiculous. Now, at the end, they put down Al Gore. I kind of like that, actually. Put down Al Gore all you want. You know, that was reasonable. They put down McKibben, which, no, not really. Put down Bobby Kennedy. What they did was they went to the million-person, that big march in Washington in New York on global warming. There were 1 million people there. And they're wondering, you know, there's 1 million things going on, and they cornered Bobby Kennedy, and he said something about biofuels that was wrong. But, you know, they didn't interview him, and they got McKibben to say this, and it's incredibly nasty and really, really without scientific merit. I hope the tragedy of this film is not that it puts down renewable energy. It's completely ineffectual. Rush Limbaugh and the nuclear industry, I mean, they're going to pick up on it. It's not going to do them any good. The tragedy is that it really compromises Michael, who has been, you know, a great friend and extremely effective, very important to the left. He's a really important guy, beautiful guy, and he's put his name on this just total piece of garbage. And as a film, as a documentary, it's completely indefensible. Just absolutely amateurish and flat out fact-checkable wrong on everything they said, except about biofuels, which we all knew anyway. So, you know, Kathy, I'll turn it over to you, but I mean, I could go on about the detail. This guy from England made a beautiful half-hour film, which you should see. And in the long run, that half-hour film this will be good for the renewable energy industry. Because if I was an opponent of solar and wind, I would have been absolutely embarrassed to put this thing out. It's going to be completely shredded. And, you know, if you really want to put down those technologies, you could do, these guys are completely unprofessional. It's like Dumb and Dumber or Bill and Ted's Excellent Invention. I mean, it is Bush League stuff. So I hope, Bob, that Michael will at some point come to his senses and take his name off the thing. It's not damaging in the long run to us. It's not going to hurt the renewable energy industry. It's going to hurt Michael more. And that's a shame. So Kathy, I'll let you go.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for all those comments. That's covered a lot of kind of what I wrote about in my piece. So I saw this film and as a climate activist and also as a Bernie supporter and a Michael Moore supporter was similarly flabbergasted. And I just put together a piece on my Facebook page at first, just outlining everything I found wrong with it. And then so many people asked me to put it on Medium or, you know, some sort of blog where it could be shared. So I did, I put it on Medium. And then since then it's also been republished in the Free Press. So you can go see it there. And it includes a lot of diagrams.
It's a great piece, Kathy. It's a great piece. Thank you.
Thank
really,
you.
really good.
And it was one of the earlier rebuttals. So since then it's been just a cascade of rebuttals from all kinds of writers and scientists from various points of view. And it's not that the movie doesn't bring up anything of value. It does ask some good questions, but where it asks some good questions, it has no solutions. But I guess one thing I want to start off with is, so I had gone to campaign in Iowa for the last week of January for the Bernie campaign to volunteer in Iowa and saw Michael Moore there. Michael Moore was there and I actually got a selfie with him there that I proudly put on my page. And I also saw an event where he was speaking with Naomi Klein and they were touting the Green New Deal. And little did I know, but backstage, she was trying to convince him not to put out this film and he didn't listen to her. And Naomi Klein wrote, she wrote This Changes Everything, probably one of the most foremost books about climate change in society. And if you're not going to listen to Naomi Klein on this, like, who are you going to listen to? And apparently Bill McKibben had reached out to him, had started hearing about rumors about this film like last June and had been trying to reach out to Michael Moore and they hadn't returned his calls. So that's not what a real journalist would actually do. Like you say, it's completely Bush League. But so I had kind of three major issues with the film. The first one being the lack of solutions. The people I've talked to said that they just found it incredibly depressing. So, you know, for example, the overpopulation issue that they bring up, which there is certainly a debate to be had about population. It's being had on many climate discussion groups and discussion boards I'm on. Look up the book Project Drawdown. So Drawdown, it was a lot of scientists and activists that came together to outline the 100 top solutions to climate change. And their solutions are very wide ranging. They're, you know, solar and wind and renewables like you would expect, but lots of other things. And one of them is education of girls and family planning. And they came to the conclusion what Harvey just said, that if you empower women, women who have control or have, you know, agency over their own lives, they have an income, they have education, they have fewer children. And that's part of developing the poor countries so that's the other issue, is that where population is growing fast is in poor countries where per capita there is much lower energy use. The main energy use, the people who are causing all the emissions are in the first world countries like us, like Europe, Canada, Australia. We're the ones using all the energy. So the whole population thing is a very mixed bag, but they don't get into any solutions. And so if you don't do that, it's very easy to wander into eco-fascism or, you know, some really bad ideas about population. So that was one issue I had. And also, I guess I would say about overconsumption was another legitimate issue they brought up. Yes, there is definitely overconsumption. We've all seen that. especially in the developed world. I don't know anyone in the environmental movement who doesn't agree with that and has not been talking about that for a long time. So, for example, the 100% renewable energy campaign that I've been working on for the past few years, the very first thing is energy efficiency. And one of the foundations of the Green New Deal is cities are where most of the carbon emissions takes place, and within cities it's mostly buildings. So let's make the buildings carbon neutral. Let's go in and make them energy efficient. That'll create a ton of jobs to retrofit and upgrade these buildings, to put renewable energy on them, but also make them just use less. And also design our city so that people don't have to drive everywhere. And you know, there are just a lot of basic solutions like that. And just learn to, you know, do more telecommuting. Just learn to use less energy. So that was my first thing, was the lack of solutions.
One thing also, Kathy, on energy efficiency, I just talked with Amory Lovins this week, who's the great guru of energy efficiency.
Yeah.
This film never shows a single LED light. And
yes.
you know, we're in the middle of an incredible revolution, technological revolution in lighting. LED lighting has changed everything. And they're talking about overconsumption, and they never talk about one of the greatest breakthroughs in energy efficiency technology in human history. Is LED lighting has changed everything.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Absolutely. And then the second big problem I had with it was what you pointed out about all the misinformation about renewables. So over and over, they show really old, like they showed a solar field in Michigan. It was in 2008. And they say how these solar panels are not efficient. These solar panels are like 600 or 800 times more efficient now than they were then. And that's part of the price of solar going down, because it's, you know, as much as, like, that's in computer years, like, or your cell phone is sort of like showing a flip phone and complaining that it can't surf the internet. Like, things have really changed since then, and it doesn't talk about that. Or I just learned that from the 30-minute film that you mentioned, I learned that the concert that they showed that that they complained was not entirely powered by solar, it was in 2005. Like, that's just misleading not to put dates on that.
One other thing, and this is worth, Kathy, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
They the whole big put down on electric cars. And
oh,
they showed
yes.
an electric car. They showed an electric car in 2010.
Yes.
For God's sake, 10 years ago. And then they complain that the electric car is being powered by a grid that has coal on it, and therefore the whole concept of electric cars is out the window. I mean, this is so stupid.
Well, and the Union of Concerned Scientists has crunched those numbers. We have studies showing that even if it was powered on 100% coal, the electric car is still more efficient. It still releases less carbon emissions.
An electric car is 4 times as efficient as an internal combustion engine. And you don't have things like spark plugs and you know, and oil pans and radiators. I mean, an electric car has like 3 moving parts. And you can power an electric car with 100% coal if you want. You don't anymore. The grid is only about 25% to 30% coal in many places, and even less now. But even if you powered an electric car 100% with coal, it's still 3 to 4 times more efficient than a gas-fired car.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are working on working on cleaning up the grid. So one of the main asks of our campaign for 100% renewable in Columbus is to pass community choice aggregation for 100% renewable energy and to use that to build out local solar. And if that happens, then we've really cleaned up the grid in Columbus, and in Ohio in general, we've added to clean energy on the grid. So, and also if you talk about liquid fuels, so they talked about biofuels and liquid fuels powering planes. So what is the answer to that? Well, one of the best ways to get down the amount of flying is high-speed rail. In Europe, that has been shown, like on some lines, say from Paris to Lyon, France, that basically completely displaced flying on these, like between short-haul flights or up to medium-haul flights. High-speed rail can cut into that flying quite a bit, and that runs entirely on electricity. So,
Right.
but they don't talk about that.
Right. And we can thank John Kasich for killing rail travel in Columbus. Columbus remains I think, the biggest state capital in the world that has no passenger rail service.
Yeah,
I wish they had covered that in the film. They should also point out, since we're talking about Ohio, that northern Ohio is perfect for commercial wind.
Yes, absolutely.
It's good wind. It's flat. The grid is there. The places where the electricity is used are close: Toledo, Cleveland, Buffalo, Erie, all those cities along the lake, Detroit, and it's been killed by the nuclear power industry. And wind up there would be perfect, but these guys don't even begin to get close to that. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So they also, I mean, I don't know if they realized they were doing this, but they repeated a lot of the, I guess, myths of the climate denial industrial complex. So this idea of intermittency, the wind doesn't always shine and the sun doesn't always blow. Well, the solution to that is to upgrade the grid, to put a critical mass of renewable energy onto the grid, so that if the wind isn't blowing right where you live, it's going to be blowing somewhere near you. And if all of that is going onto the grid at the same time, then we are sharing that. And the second solution to that is battery power. So there's a little village in Ohio called Minster, Ohio, that has a large solar array with battery backup, and they run a Dannon yogurt factory off of it. Like, this can be done, is being done, and it's completely ignored in this film.
Right. They have a complete misunderstanding of the grid. I mean, even at this point, intermittency is dealt with the grid. For example, at night when you don't have your solar panels, you take electricity from the grid, but you've poured it into the grid in the daytime. They never mention those magic words, net metering, where you go back and forth and you basically use the grid as a battery. But that's way too sophisticated. I am still, for this film, I'm still stunned. I mean, these two guys, Jeff and Ozzy, it's like Bill and Ted's Great Adventure. I mean, yeah. these guys are dumb and dumber, and Michael Moore has made a career of making really high quality, well-researched, really interesting films. He's wonderful on camera. These two guys are just like bozos. I mean, I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, and they don't, like Ozzy is the main, quote, expert that they interview, but they don't talk about his expertise or why is he an expert. So another thing he keeps saying is that if you have to use, that echoes the denial industry, if you have to use fossil fuels to make a solar panel, then it's no better than fossil fuels. But there's a whole area of research called life cycle analysis that has looked into this, lots and lots of science, from beginning, like from the mining to this finished product and how much energy it makes. And it shows that solar and wind have many times less use of natural resources and less greenhouse gas emissions than, say, coal and oil, which makes sense because, say you build a coal plant, then you have to keep mining and drilling to supply that coal plant, and it has to continually be burned. Whereas once you make a solar panel, you put it up and it works for 25, 30 years. And then the parts can be recycled. So it's just common sense.
Case, they said that, there's a question from Train, I'll answer in a minute, but in one case, they said that solar panels are designed to last 10 years. That is flat out wrong.
Yeah, that's just false.
There's actually no theoretical limit to how long solar panels can operate. It was a few years ago, but I was at a conference and they had the original, the very first photovoltaic cell. It was made at Bell Labs in the 1950s. The second photovoltaic cell went up on a satellite. They were initially developed for use on satellites in space so that they could get their own power. And the very first prototype was still generating electricity after 40 years. I mean, there's no theoretical limit to how long photovoltaic cells will operate. Train is asked what Michael Moore has said in defense. I don't know. I tuned in and I watched Michael being interviewed, and he gave a great 10-minute rap on overconsumption. I mean, it was brilliant. And if he had made a movie, about overconsumption, that would have been great. The implication was he was with these two clowns, and the implication was that the movie was about overconsumption. And it starts out talking about overconsumption, and then it goes into La La Land. And so Michael's rap was wonderful, but it wasn't about the film.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I've never heard him say anything about the film, actually.
Yeah. When he has tried to defend it, he talks about what he talks about is not what the film says. And he says, we never talked about overpopulation. No, you did. It's right there in the film. So, and it's so much of the film is dated. So there's no mention of Greta Thunberg. There's no mention of the youth climate strike. There's no mention of the Green New Deal. There's no mention of Standing Rock and the indigenous people and their solutions. Like so much of the climate movement of the past, really 6, 8, 10 years is just completely untouched, unmentioned.
I was thankful for one thing, that they did not advocate nuclear power. I mean,
yeah, actually, I was shocked that they didn't bring up nuclear. Like, how did nuclear not come up in this?
Because I think they're afraid of us.
Well, I'm
glad they didn't do that. Because
I do have a friend who thinks that, like, trying to figure out why Michael Moore did this, she thinks that the nuclear industry might be behind it, because the nuclear industry is always trying to trash renewables because they're trying to make, people go with nuclear, which is much more expensive and has the toxic waste problem. But they're always, Michael Schellenberger, who's one of probably the top nuclear shill in the country.
His name is Scheisskopf.
Oh, okay. Well, he's, was the first to be out there touting this film. So, but I don't know if that's true or not. Other people.
No, it is. But the way they did it, and this is the third time I've encountered this shtick here. The nuclear industry a long time ago recruited a guy named Patrick Moore.
Yeah,
and
Patrick
he had
Moore,
been part of Greenpeace. And so everything he does, he says, oh, I was part of Greenpeace and I was an environmentalist. And then you get this guy, Michael Scheisskopf, and he says, oh, my parents were anti-nuclear. And, they always wear a plaid shirt or a T-shirt. They always try to look really hip. And then in the beginning of this film, this guy, Jeff, says, oh, he shows himself hugging a tree and he's wearing a plaid shirt and he shows articles he wrote. But none of these guys have any credentials whatsoever. If they really wanted to make a film about renewable energy, they had to talk to Amory Levins and who's in Rocky Mountain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too, and Michael Jacobson, who's at Stanford.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they talk to no experts whatsoever. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So is anybody else? Kathy, go ahead.
Oh no, I just was going to say absolutely. Yeah, Mark Jacobson has done a lot of research about how to power cities, states, entire countries with 100% renewable energy, and he has had a lot of research teams that have been inspired by him and done similar work, and all of that work is out there. And maybe there is a debate possibly to be had about that, and those debates have been had, but it's completely unmentioned by this film.
So Train has suggested we make a film. The guy who did the Takedown in England, it's quite watchable. It's a half hour. The only problem is he has a really thick British accent, and they should have, even though he's speaking in English, they should have had subtitles. But if you can get the URL for that film, and
I'll
maybe
see if I can find that. Yeah.
Somebody has already put that link, I think, in the chat and pointed out that this British man has quoted you, Kathy, twice in his film, and brings up little bits of your article there on the screen. So that's quite impressive. Congratulations.
That was very kind of him.
So let's let some other people chime in. We got a lot of comments here in the chat. Does anybody want to say anything? I see a lot from Greg Pace.
Just the fact we live within walking distance of a solar shingle house that was built by students from Worthington High School that sells excess back to the grid. I mean, there was no mention of any of the other technologies that are commonly used.
Well, the technology I'm now pushing is I want to just get one of these big round hamster cages and put Trump in it and let Trump run it and generate electricity that way. That would power other grid.
So anybody want to, does somebody have a comment? Oh, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, what about Tesla? Now, he just came out, you know, he's trying to get his factories back together. He's getting mad at California because they got him shut down, the local town where he's got a factory. But ideally, I mean, his idea of selling people batteries for backup for their houses, you can have 1, 2, or 3 of them. The grid goes down. You've got battery back. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the batteries back up the power, and they also run them clean every once in a while just to make sure that they're in good shape. So if you have a solar roof, you got these batteries in there, of course it's going to cost a lot of money, and it's beyond us at this point, or just about anybody, unless you're kind of wealthy to do it. But distributed solar power with battery backups on a local level, you know, it's like everything's local, right? So,
well, you can make
anyway,
utilities pay for it like they did in Germany, and then they get energy down the road. I mean, that we've already solved that.
Yeah, but what utilities are going to allow or going to buy into that here unless they're, you know, making gobs of money off of the people? It's not going to happen.
I heard an equally deep, credible discussion about Germany on Fox News, and one of the Fox commentators said that the reason Germany can go 100% solar and the United States can't is because they have so much more sunlight in Germany.
Oh, Germany's farther north than Ohio is.
I know, I love to say that in California. People really get off on that, you know.
So there is some discussion about, say, using, like, once electric vehicle batteries and the vehicles are worn out, those batteries can be recycled into home batteries. We've just barely begun to scratch the surface of what can be done with this technology.
Yeah. It's quite amazing.
The vehicles thing, I mean, we just bought a Prius, and there's people online talking all the time, and they've had these cars for over a decade, and the batteries are still good, you know? And meanwhile, how much are they saving? And if you're, you know, you want to start out with an electric car, totally, you might have problems there getting charged when you want to, or, you know, have a gas hybrid that charges as a starter thing to just see how it goes, you know?
Well, the Priuses, you can actually get an old Prius, and if the body's in good shape, you can trade out the battery for like about $1,500, $2,000, and you're just basically back in business. And but soon, in 10 years from now or less, you will not be able to buy a gas-fired car.
Yeah.
Not for government regulation, but because they just won't compete. I mean, and there's no maintenance in an electric car. You know, that's why the auto industry and the dealers are so freaked out about electric cars. There's nothing to do to them, you know, and so that's where it's going really quick.
Yeah,
that's why.
And you don't have to spend an arm and a leg. So my first electric car was a Nissan Leaf. It was a used Leaf, 3 years old, $12,000. And soon there will be a lot more used electric cars because that's where we're going. And it was kind of a big leap of faith for me to go from gas to electric, but I would never go back. And you know, there've been a couple of times where I've been worried about range and running out of miles, but for the most part, there are a lot more charging stations now, and there's an app called PlugShare that you can use to find the charging stations. Some of them are free, and mostly people charge their cars at night in their own garage. So it's more than rather than thinking of it like stopping at a gas station for a fill up, think of it more like keeping your cell phone charged. Like, you know, you just plug it in when you get home and then it's charged up.
Right. Of course, in Back to the Future, he put in a banana peel. I don't know. We'll be able to do that soon, I think.
So we got some interesting comments here in our chat. I don't know, Will Perkins, do you have audio? Did you want to make any of your comments out loud? Or Greg Pace, Lynn Stan?
Yeah, this is Will. I don't know what movie you guys were watching. I watched this movie 3 to 4 times, and I have yet to hear or to see anything that you are describing here tonight. I honest to God, I don't know. I don't think it was a movie that was designed to break down the environmental movement in this country. I didn't see that at all. Again, three to four times I've watched it and I haven't seen that. These people are not anti-environmental. I watched Josh Fox the other day on The Rising, or on The Hill Rising, and honest to God, it became clear to me that it was a puncture of his ego that these guys had come out with this movie that was asking some really pertinent questions. So I don't know where you guys are coming off at. To me, it's a big ego bash. So I consider a lot of you people my friends, but that's my opinion. So you got it.
Well, you're entitled.
Yeah, I mean, and Michael's got in trouble with this before when he did Roger and Me. The problem is with the dates. I mean, he's doing gotcha stuff with 2005 footage, which is fundamentally dishonest. I mean, I could go out and show you the old solar panel at Columbus State, from when Jimmy Carter was around, and they were put up, and to say the goddamn thing doesn't work anymore. But what's the point?
Yeah, I think the problem people have with it, Will, mostly is that they just use such old footage and tried to portray it as being something that was current. And
Did you want them to come up with something futuristic, maybe?
Well, no, I mean, Michael knows. I worked on
being
campaigns with Michael back with Zoltan Ferenczi, and our whole thing was to put people to work retrofitting houses. And that was 50% of the energy savings, but he didn't really come out with that stuff in the film.
I think mainly just had they said anything about what was going on in 2020, because I think the points that I've seen in the rebuttals is that they are touting what was going on back in 2005, 2008, 2011, but they not trying to predict the future, show the future, just actually make it more honest about what's actually going on right now, like in 2020.
I keep hearing the mention about population control, which that's a perfectly legitimate discussion.
Yeah, absolutely, but they don't talk about the solution. There's no debate about the solution.
I didn't see where the focus of that movie was about population control in the first place. I think it was about
the discussion of it.
They interviewed 5 or 6 people who talked about it.
About population control?
Yes, who mentioned population.
I mean, the solution to population is very simple. It would have taken them 10 seconds to say Planned Parenthood. That's all you got to do.
I don't disagree with that. Not for a minute do I disagree with that. In fact, I agree with everything that both you and Kathy are saying about, I think we ought to have women in charge. Honest to God, I think that is a solution.
Well, not Hillary, but women in general.
Yeah,
but I mean, Ozzie Zahner says straight up that renewable energy is no better than fossil fuels, and that's just false. The research shows it's false.
That's not what I heard.
He did say that.
No, wait. I think basically what he was trying to say is that we can go out and develop these new environmental renewable processes like solar, wind. I'm completely committed to those things. But there's some carbon footprint connected with that, and we seem to want to ignore that.
No, we don't want to ignore. I mean, the research has been done. These questions have been considered, and life cycle analysis show any form of energy you use is going to have some footprint on the earth and on carbon. Just existing has a footprint. But you can compare what is the footprint. That's what this area of research does. And we know that renewables have much less of a footprint. That's why the Green New Deal is predicated on energy efficiency and rolling out a lot of renewables, along with a lot of things like replacing lead pipes and cleaning up toxic waste and restoring our wetlands. There's a lot that could be done under the Green New Deal, but the Green New Deal is a lot about switching to renewable energy. We have to switch to renewable energy. We can't stay on fossil fuel.
I am a person who took the time and the investment to go through the solar installers course at Blue Rock Station, along with Greg Pace. And I am a person that, you know, I will never get over the fact that we can have that bright light up in the sky generate energy for us.
Yeah, it's amazing.
To not take full advantage of that makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Absolutely.
And to cram poisons down into our earth to gain something to fuel, you know, what we do every day, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. So
I'm 100% with you there.
I'm on board on this thing. All I'm saying is now is not the time to be getting into some big ego fest over this daggone thing. Why don't we take this movie and take the positive parts of it and get a discussion going to where we can start moving ahead? I think the point that they're trying to make is that we're losing the race. And if we don't step up our game, you know, we're going to end up losing the race. I'm concerned about that.
I think all of us know that we're losing the race. A lot of the reason we're losing the race is a 3-decade-long deliberate plan of climate denial by the fossil fuel industry, funded by billions of dollars from mainly Exxon and Koch brothers, but also others. And this movie repeats a lot of the same things from that same climate denial industry about renewable energy. That's what I found so disheartening about it. I'm actually really glad to hear Harvey say that he doesn't think it will hurt renewables, because I'm really worried that it will hurt the Green New Deal.
No, I don't think
because
so.
I'm hearing progressives say these same things that the climate denial industry funded by fossil fuels has been saying for 3 decades. And we can't have that. The Green New Deal is our hope to, you know, to get beyond this.
You know, perhaps we ought to pay a little bit more attention to some of the information and the concepts that are coming from a group over in Europe called the Extinction Rebellion. I think if you were to take a little bit of time and listen to their concepts of, and this gets back to government is what it is. I mean, our form of government right now is not working. I think that's plain to everybody. You know, the choices that we have today, come on, that's just absolutely ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And basically what they're saying is that we need to move back toward a more localized government, much like the things that are coming out of a group that I'm connected with, which is the Columbus Community Bill of Rights group. We need to set up citizen assemblies, you know, made up of people like you, Kathy, that are taking complex problems that we have and using a wide variety of people to come up with solutions at a local level for those things. And until we start getting back to that kind of a grassroots kind of government, we're not going to be making any inroads into saving this planet. Now, you know what? I got a hell of a lot more days behind me than I got days ahead of me. But I would much rather leave this earth knowing that you know, my kids and my grandkids got a fighting chance. And right now, I don't have that.
Absolutely.
That's a good segue. Hey, this is Suzanne, a good segue into Bill Lyons, who also had asked to speak tonight on behalf of the Columbus Community Bill of Rights. So are you ready, Bill, to talk about that?
Yes, I am.
Get him, Bill.
Thanks. Yeah, good segue, Will. Yeah, so just give everybody an update about, you know, we're on our 4th campaign, this time for a Columbus Community Bill of Rights city charter amendment. And we started just before, actually, ComFest was our first real petitioning last year. And so we've been collecting signatures throughout the year. And we need 9,870 valid. And so, yeah, we're going to need, I'd say, close to like 15,000, and we would get it. Well, we've collected about 9,000 so far. And of course, the pandemic happened. So we stopped even before the emergency and stopped before the primary and said, look, we can't do this and we got to stop collecting signatures there. So You know, what happened is DeWine says, well, people shouldn't have to choose between their constitutional rights and their health. So in essence, they postpone the primary, of course, which is a reasonable thing. Well, our right to petition is a First Amendment right, freedom of speech, and that is a constitutional right. And we also don't want to choose between that and our health here. So we then wrote to City Council to say, well, that 1-year deadline, which by the way didn't exist until they put in a issue on the ballot, several issues in 2014 to get it changed to 1 year. And almost, I don't think I know of any other city in Ohio that has a 1-year deadline. So that's one thing about it there. So anyhow, we've had to suffer for that with our small group of spending countless hours collecting thousands of signatures, fourth time. And a lot of us aren't very young, but we're doing it unpaid. And we asked them to extend the deadline, and they said, well, we can't do that. That has to be changed in the charter, even though the charter does have emergency measures written in it. So then we appealed to City Council to say, well, then don't let democracy be another victim of this the coronavirus pandemic. So put our initiative on the ballot. Then they said, no, we can't do that. That would be unprecedented or something like that. We said, no, that in the city charter, it says there are 2 ways to get a charter amendment. One is by a 2/3 vote from City Council, which means 5 of the 7 could agree. And we think ours is a very valid reason to protect our water, to put it on the ballot, because obviously we can't collect signatures. So they refused. Then we wrote to the Columbus Health Commissioner recently and said, well, just like Amy Acton made the emergency about that. So what about tolling the deadline for our issue so that, we had to suspend signature gathering. And of course, they wanted us to do that. And it's against the law, I think, to collect signatures now. The health, Columbus, was it Mashika, what's her name, Roberts, I think? She wrote back to us and said, well, work with the City Council. So what we're going to be doing here very shortly is we're going to have a big press release telling all about this and asking people to call City Council members and write to them and say, put the Columbus Community Bill of Rights on the ballot. It's not acceptable for them to say, oh, well, you can start again. Well, when, first of all, and why should our democracy have to wait for that? That's not fair. When they use, they're going to make all kinds of emergencies, which they've already had, for legitimate reasons. We think this is a legitimate reason. So we're going to ask you soon to use your voice to tell them, to put pressure on them, put our initiative on the ballot. Anybody have any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
I'd like to add something.
Yeah, sure, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, and they should be aware, we're trying to make them aware in our press release of the legislation that's just come out, and it's going to go to the floor in committee. Well, it's in committee right now. It's the 4th attempt to commodify frac brines so they can basically sell them on shelves like they did in some test markets up in Lowe's and so forth. But this stuff is so radioactive that it's a crazy thing that they're still doing it, because we've been giving them information for the last 2 or 3 years about how radioactive conventional brines are. And they're hundreds of times over the environmental discharge limit sometimes. And so they really need to understand how critical it is to protect the city at this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and one other thing I pointed out to them, and I don't know if everybody knows this, but Pittsburgh actually faced the threat of fracking inside the city about a little over 10 years ago. And in 2010, the City Council of Pittsburgh passed a Community Bill of Rights very similar to what we've been trying to do. But we're not asking the City Council to pass something like this. Well, we're saying at least put it on the ballot and let people have a voice and let democracy rule. So, yeah, if they don't want to do it.
What do you need us to do, Bill?
I had a question right quick.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Are any did any ballot initiatives make any ballots this past primary for the state of Ohio?
I haven't heard of any.
Does anybody know?
Question. Yeah, yeah.
Because we're working on our petitioning on the state level. So, did anybody make it?
Well, I think only like school levies, no citizens initiative that I know of went forward. And a lot of it was the pandemic.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. We've been monitoring like nationwide, and there have been different issues. Of course, there's a lot of people going through the same thing right now. And one was a candidate to get on the ballot. And she had collected some signatures, but not nearly enough. But then she had to sue. And I think the court ruled that she made a good faith effort, and it was impossible for her to get signatures. So they said, put her on the ballot.
In Illinois, the Green Party was put on without signatures because of the pandemic.
Maybe we should do that with the nuke petition.
Yeah, exactly.
We should be able to do it with all petitioning at this point. That's what.
Right.
That's what we're trying to figure out, how to do this pretty much for everybody, because everybody can put their 2 cents in, because there's been citizens initiatives, I'm sure, all across Ohio that didn't get through.
And the other thing is how long we might be dealing with this pandemic for like 2 years. Does that mean we're supposed to accept that the right to initiative is just put on hold? That's our constitutional right. So it's in the Ohio Constitution since 1912.
If there's something you specifically need the public to do for Columbus Bill of Rights, what I usually do after the salon is I gather all the information that people have put in the chat and any other extra links that anybody wants, actions that you want people to do, and I email it out to the whole Free Press list again. So if you want to send me that information, I'll send it out to everybody. And we're getting really close to 9 o'clock, and we got one more song from Brian Clash Griffin. So last words.
Yeah, so just to say that, yes, that press release I'll send to you. You can publish it. If we'll have links to our letters and their responses. And at the bottom of the press release says to ask people to contact city council members, and it will have their emails and their phone numbers.
Great. Any other comments from people that are still on?
Well, thank you. This was great.
Thank you, Harvey and Kathy and Bill and Will and Brian. You're up.
All right. Oh my God, it's so great to see everyone and just be part of this. Missed the cooking and the food, but you know what? We're going to get there again. Gonna do this. We were talking about Kent Stadium stuff.
We need Bob's soup.
Yeah, we do. And here's some Phil Oakes to kind of close things out. I ain't marching anymore. So here we go. Well, I marched in the Battle of New Orleans at the end of the early British War. Young land was growing, while blood flowing, but I ain't marching anymore. Well, I killed my share of Injuns in 1,000 different fights. I was there at the Little Big Horn. I saw many men a-lying, I saw many more a-dying, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the wars. It's always the young to fall. Look at all we won with the saber and the guns. Tell me, is it worth it all? Well, I stole California from the Mexican lands, running the bloody Civil War. Yes, I even killed my brothers and so many others, and I ain't marching anymore. Well, I marched to the battle of the German trench in a war that was bound to end all wars. Oh, I must have killed 1 million men Now they want me back again, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the wars, always the young to fall. Look at all we won with the saber and the guns. Tell me, is it worth it all? Well, I flew to final mission in the Japanese skies, set off the mighty mushroom roar. As I saw the cities burning, I knew that I was learning that I ain't marching anymore. Now the labor leaders screaming as they close the missile plant. Your dotted fruit screams at the Cuban shore. Call it peace or call it treason, call love or call it reason, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the chicken hawks to lead us to the wars, always the poor, the fall. Look at all we won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all? Well, I marched through the jungles of the Asian land, set off the napalm orange glow. Tell me time and time again, there's no such war that you can win. I ain't marching anymore. Well, I saw the airplanes flying through that crystal sky. I watched those mighty towers fall. As a poet sit and wonder why we're marching off again to die. But I ain't marching anymore. No, I ain't marching anymore. We ain't marching anymore. We ain't marching anymore, no. We ain't marching anymore, no.
Ballot's writer for the Lantern. Bob Dylan said that he was more of a journalist than he was a songwriter, but great lyrics. Thanks, Brian.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you,
Brian.
I love you all so much.
Thanks, Brian.
Spirit of the movement. Right home.
Brian.
Thanks everybody for tuning in again to another Cyber-Salon. If you have ideas for what to do in June, email them to me. And watch for my email after this.
Okay. Yep.
Thank
you all.
Thanks, Brian.
Hey, can we all sing a song together? Would that work if we all sang together?
Okay. Yeah.
If you can hear me, goodbye, everybody.
Solidarity Forever.
Yes.
What song do you know we can all sing, Brian? You got one?
How about Power to the People?
All right.
Yes. Power to the people. We gotta stump it out first.
Over@wyman.com.
Power to the people. Power to the people. Power to the people. Power to the people, right?
Take a look.
Well, you say you want a revolution. You better get it on right away. But we'll be on the streets, marching feet. Let's hear you. Power to the people. Power to the people. Power to the people.
Yeah.
Power to the people. Well, I'll tell you, nothing. The workers are nothing. Gotta get them what they really know. Even now, we need to help everyone out there. All our helpers, our essential employees. Gotta keep us strong. They can help us along. We're singing power to the people. Let's hear it. Power to the people. Power to the people. Power to the people, right on. Well, I ask you, brothers and sisters, how do you treat your other ones back home? We gotta keep them strong, help them along. We'll sing it. Power to the people, power to the people. Now, I don't know if we can all sing together at the same time. With
I think he's way around the golf course. Good.
So everyone sing your power to the people song. Power to the people.
Power to the people. Power to the people.
Hilarious. Power to the people. Power to the people. Power to the people. Power to the people, right on. Power to the people. Oh, power to the people, right on. To the people. Power to the people, right on. Right on.
Right
Power
on.
to the people, right on.
Right on.
Peace and love, guys.
Stay strong.
Gonna get through it.
Let's join forces. Keep our treasures.
Yeah, don't sit.
All right, everybody.
Good night, guys.
Good night. Be safe.
Good night.
Good night.
Brian.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Becca.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Brian. See, come over should have been
Next time.
Oh, goodbye. Bye, Brian.
Bye, Brian.
Which Brian?
You, Brian.
You, Brian.
I thought it was that Brian.
Brian Curtis. There's Brian Curtis.
All right.
Oh, it's me.
Brutus.
Go Bucks.
All right then.
Brutus and his accessories.
See you next month.
See you all later.
Guys, thank you. Good night, Margaret.
Margaret. I know. Hopefully we can meet again in the flesh.
Yeah.
Like a couple of years.
Looking forward to Bob's soup.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
just made a new batch. It's really good.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. Why didn't you have some now?
Yeah, I should have been eating the cyber.
We do not want make
I
people
I
jealous.
just want to say that I'm so grateful and so happy that everybody has their own YouTube studio at home now. I call it a success.
Yep.
It's a success.
Absolutely.
One of the successes of the pandemic.
That's right. That's
Even
right.
Charlie was able to get on Zoom.
Yeah, well,
Charlie.
Kind of. He's there, sort of.
I saw him. He's
And he's supposed to be doing a putting video. Still there.
Froze up. Oh, okay, guys. All right, I'm going to shut it off.
Aww.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.
Bye, Suzanne. Hopefully we see.
I'm gonna.
Hopefully we can be in the carriage house soon.
Oh, can I do that? Wait, Suzanne.
Hang on. He'll pass it off to you.
I'm gonna make you the host.
And then you guys.
Which Brian?
There you go.
Okay, Suzanne, you're in
You're the
charge.
host.
And I see Charlie. He's back with a Cincinnati cap.
Hey, Charlie. How about? Hey, I keep seeing Tom over, but can you talk, Tom? Can you say hi?
There's only 8. Wait, there's
There's that too.
there. That's
Yeah, you've still got. Just unblock or unmute everybody.
I did. I've unmuted
Everybody's
everybody.
unmuted. Maybe some of their speakers or their mics don't work. Okay,
Right.
you're the boss of the meeting now. You can keep everybody chatting. Maybe Brian is promoting the Green Curtis. Oh yeah, I was gonna have you promote that. We ran out of time.
Promote what?
The WGRN mugs. The WGRN mug. Turn it
All
the other
right.
way.
Oh my God.
Woo.
Oh, that's the first time I saw them.
Isn't that nice?
The Green Renaissance.
I know. I mean,
Soon, well, those will be available for the public.
Yes.
we don't know when.
Here, I'll go get it. I'll go get it. Hang on.
Wait.
One
there's
more
also-
item you must see as well.
WGRN's been
Sweater.
off the air for like 2 months.
What has?
We just celebrated our 4th anniversary.
Yeah, no, WGRNs. But what about the WCRS?
CRS.
Oh, we're still ticking.
Good.
I think like 15 years or something.
So we have a storefront with a whole bunch of swag that's supposed to support all of the free press identities. So WCRS and WGRN and
Really?
Columbus Free Press. Yeah, if you go to traindepriest.com, you can preview it because that's where I'm building it. But as soon as we get all our ducks in a row,
Fresh out of the dryer.
there's Bob's
Other side
show.
of the news for Bob. The other side of the news.
The other side of the news.
Woo!
Yeah.
Nice.
So we
you
got all
guys
kinds
haven't
of
done a show since like the last time I was at the carriage house.
We've been doing Bob's show on Zoom. We've been recording them in the house, recording them on Zoom, making them into MP3 and playing them on the channel.
Still available.
They haven't been up on WCRS.
Oh, no, you're right. I have been very remiss, and I don't know that I even have the files. I would have to download it off of Airtime and then put it up on WCRS.
Because we've been re-airing the same show for like the last 2-3 months.
Well, Bob.
Why is it going up on WCRS?
You're the only person who has the other side of the news past.
You need to show me how to do it so I can upload it.
Oh my God!
Because I've been uploading it to Pro for WRN.
Wait a minute, I have to, if I don't put it up on the WCRS site, it doesn't play on WCRS, darn it.
That makes sense.
No.
I mean, how else would it?
I'm sorry, you know what, I'm working from home, and you would think, oh, she's working from home, she's got a lot of time.
I thought you were working at,
I'm busier
Columbus
than I was
State.
when I had to go into work.
Now we've been doing regular shows. We got to get them up on CRS.
Actually, Juanita's doing her show over Zoom too, and anybody who who used to do a show could still be doing their show if they just do them over Zoom. It's really
I just do my show here at home.
well. Yes, you
There are
do.
a lot of distractions, like an old fuddy-duddy and playing with his cats and watching like Netflix
Can
and
he hear you now? You better be careful.
no, he's up on the 3rd floor.
Yeah, but that's as opposed to the old fuddy-duddy who's usually at the carriage house.
And you know that he's not in, so you can.
Well, Zirkle doesn't live there anymore. Train.
Oh, I'm talking about Dan. That's fuddy-duddy.
The other guy on the other side of the news.
The other fuddy-duddy on the other side of the news.
Right. I miss that guy. I haven't
So
seen him.
Juanita, I see Juanita on the list. Juanita, can you talk?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Hey, Juanita, do you have a guest for us to interview tomorrow?
No.
Oh.
I was thinking about, I had spoke to Connie Hammond last week about doing an interview.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I'll call her tonight and see if she can do it.
Yeah, if you can't find somebody, let me know. I can dig somebody up just so you can make sure you have a show playing next week.
Okay, so are we gonna be doing it on Sundays from?
We can either do it, well, let's see. We're going to visit my dad tomorrow, so it would probably have to be before 3:30 if it's tomorrow, which really gives us the window of like noon to 3:30 because we don't get up early. We know that
You don't get up early?
And
No.
not just Juanita.
It's light out at 6 a.m. now.
And well, I have to get up early Monday through Friday still.
Yeah, why?
But we're not going to go visit my dad Monday, so we could do it Monday night too, Juanita. So it's either
Monday night would be better because tomorrow's Mother's Day, and
Oh, right.
so
Let's plan to do it Monday after 5.
Happy early.
that sounds good.
Good.
Next month is like 10 years that WCRS has been at the carriage house.
Wow. I know.
So it'd be really nice if there was a new show from the other side of the news.
I'm so sorry.
Or like 12.
Because I'm not really, doing it anymore, like finishing the show. It's Train that's doing it. And it's not his fault that it's not up there. It's just they got lost in the shuffle. But I'm
Bob, Suzanne, why don't we have some of the staff folks from WCRS as guests? Because obviously,
Yes.
unlike in the green room studio where we're limited to one person.
right. We could have all kinds of guests.
Lots of guests.
God,
I keep seeing Tom Over
Still like-
up there. Tom, you got something to say?
It doesn't even have to be somebody local.
Tom Over.
Yeah.
You can
Hi, Tom.
hunt down to
How are you?
Are you in town?
Can you see me or hear me or what?
I see
Hear
the
you.
Tom Over and I hear you.
No, sir.
No, I'll be real quick here.
hear you.
Great event. It was good from start to finish. Really appreciate it.
Well, next time maybe you want to sing.
That's a possibility. Let me see what I could do. We'll see. I appreciate it though. Seriously, very
And it
very good
doesn't matter
stuff.
where you are in the world because you're on Zoom.
Yeah, no, it was very good salon. So thanks for doing it. Nice.
Oh
So,
yeah, last month there were people here from what Texas?
Yeah, we're all across country.
California, Arizona.
Massachusetts, all the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, the next salon is my birthday weekend.
Oh, happy birthday salon for Brian. We'll have to say he won't get any, but you know.
Cyber cake.
I know. 4th of July has been canceled, so yeah, I won't get any.
Oh.
And the 4th of July has been canceled. I'm not gonna have any birthday love. Yeah.
Well, then everybody can just celebrate your birthday instead.
Yeah.
That leaves if
Not literally in the flash. I mean.
Hey, this is good enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't even have to take a shower or any of that stuff.
I did not take a shower. I have not taken a shower since Thursday.
And you smell great, Brian.
Thank you.
Point.
I put deodorant on daily.
I haven't showered it.
Unlike Zirkle.
To socially distance.
Right.
I'm going full Zirkle.
What? Oh, what? Oh, wow. Hello, Cliff and Sibley.
Parkinson's.
Did you have something to say, Cliff?
Hello.
Hi, Cliff. Hi, Sibley.
Hi.
Oh, there they
There you are.
So everybody was like, well, nobody's going to come to the Zoom salon because there won't be any food. But this
Of course not.
people
You
come
can bring your
anyway.
own food and beverages.
It's a BYO food affair. But I'm so glad people still come, even though they're not being fed.
We had 50 people.
Yeah.
How many?
51.
51.
51.
51? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How many like a regular in-house salon? Yeah.
What's the max you've ever had in the house? Do you know? Any
In
idea?
our house, we had 100 people when Jill Stein was here.
Well,
That was crowded. I mean, you
Yeah.
could barely move, you know.
I think we could probably get Jill Stein on a Zoom call, though. Come
Yeah,
on.
no problem. She just talked to Bob a couple of times this past week.
I'm saying
Yeah.
we could do it. That would
A
bump up
possibility.
our numbers.
Well, I don't know. If the height of her popularity is right now, but yeah, for sure.
Hey, I would.
We can
pay.
get
I don't know. Hillary said she's a Russian agent.
So maybe we'll get some people from Russia. That'd be cool.
Yeah, no, I was told as their attorney to make sure I didn't destroy any communications. And I said, comrade, why would you?
That's right. I don't know why. I'm sure they have copies of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, this is great.
So don't forget to send me the chat.
Oh, yeah.
However you did that
We
last
should figure
time.
out how to get it on WCRS.
I know how to get on WCRS. It's just that I don't always have the final version of the
But all you
show.
gotta do is, can't Train just send you the final
Yeah.
version?
Or
To me, or I could download
give me a username and a password, and I'll do it.
It's not really. See, I'm a little confused because Brian, it's not really me uploading it to the airtime for CRS because I never did that.
I think it's from like the
From the podcast on the archive.
WCRS website.
Is it when I put it up as a podcast on the archives, it plays then on the channel? Because that's all I was doing.
Like when you upload it to like the WCRS.
Yes, WCRS. I put it into FileZilla and then it jumps it up into the CRS.
I have FileZilla.
So that's what I would do. I would put it in FileZilla, but I would have to have to give you a username and passwords and everything.
Close to doing that.
And then you have to put it up and give it a title, give it a description, and then so on. Audio import.
Exactly.
And Brian lives like one house away from me, so he can.
Well, like literally around the corner.
Yeah, down my alley. He's right there, so he could show me if I had to have somebody walk me through it. But
That's true.
I'm a fairly smart guy. I think I can figure it out.
I think you can figure it out. Well, Yeah, but I'm not going to yell at him over Zoom right now.
Hey, Charlie, you finally got your picture working.
Charlie's back.
Sort of.
Oh,
Charlie.
Charlie. Yeah.
Is that Charlie in the dark?
I think so.
Lean back a little, Charlie. Let's see your face.
He's on a, or is Charlie, is that you on a Moto G7 Power?
Yeah.
I can't tell. You're in the dark.
I can see his hair, but I can't see his face.
Yeah, he can't hear us, but he can see us.
He can't hear us.
I guess, because he's not responding to us.
Yeah.
Oh, now he's connecting audio. Now here.
Oh, okay. I still see Mark Stansberry there. Thank you very much, Mark, for your presentation.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
great. Mark,
that was
thanks.
beautiful. Yeah. And who was the other gentleman who had photos that he was sharing?
Ernst?
Oh, Ernst.
Ernst, I don't know his last name, but he's all over Facebook with that stuff too.
Yeah, those are great.
He's kind of pulled in by Candy Watkins, I think, because she was trying to contact a bunch of people that had stuff, just like Mark was. Did you say something, Mark?
No, that was good. That was very nice. We're going to try to work with him to get some more pictures. We have probably about 500 pictures already.
Now,
So
did you send us the slide? Charlie?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, how's it going, Charlie?
I'm all right. How you doing?
I was out at Blacklist. That was the only place to golf I could find. It was like links golf. The grass was so high.
Well, I'll tell you what, buddy. My golf course is open. Split Rock. They've been open and not open. They want me to make a tee time. So what I've been doing, this Sunday I'm working, but in the future I have a tee time. I'm going to start making the tee time out there between 3:30 and 4:30, okay? If you're interested, man, there's always a spot. Because it's just me playing. I got 3 spots out there. If you got 3 people you want to play, come out and enjoy my golf course.
Where is it?
Definitely. We'll after this is over with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to message Suzanne, leave my phone number, and we'll exchange phone numbers and get each other on contacts. And I'm even going to get you a playing lesson from my business partner and friend Tony. Yeah, I told him he was a assistant pro at Muirfield. He had to get his amateur status back so he could.
You must have heard about my game.
Well, the idea is we're going to try to get you so you're hitting the ball good, and you're a stocky son of a bitch. I'll bet you can absolutely bust it. But I think you're you hit the ball to all fields. You're a Tony Gwynn golfer, is what I call you.
Yeah, a little Army golf.
Is that accurate, or am I totally off base?
No, you're right. I do that Army left, right, left.
Yeah, you play Army golf. Okay, well, I hit the ball very straight. I shot a 79 last Sunday at Split Rock. And the course was soggy, but I hit the ball dead where I wanted to hit it. A lot of times I was short, but my short game and putting is the strength of my game. I only had 25 putts the whole round.
Were you plucking it in that wet condition?
Yeah, I just having to fly it in the air all the way to the hole and stuff. The way I play, I love playing summer golf because I like playing to the front of the green and letting the ball release a little bit. It's kind of like they play on links golf, British Open. I love links courses. I kick ass on a links course because I like to hit the ball low and control where it goes and let the ground do the work.
Well, unfortunately, I don't shoot well on any of the courses. I mean, really bad on all of them.
Do you have your TV on in the background?
Yeah, Charlie, can you turn that down?
Yeah, I just shut it off.
Or just mute. Turn it.
Oh, I didn't know who that was.
Yeah, mine's on mute.
Yeah.
Am I too loud? I'm sorry. I'm new to this act. I'm just learning about the cyber world here.
Also, the person that's on that we haven't said hi to is Charlotte. Charlotte, did you want to say anything? Say hi?
Charlotte.
Can you talk?
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, everybody.
No,
I got talking about golf. I forgot about everybody else. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
How's everybody doing?
We're all
Fine.
good.
Great, yeah.
Did you say anything?
Good.
I was talking about Charlotte Owens.
Yeah. Hey, Charlotte.
Are we in grid view or speaker view?
Oh, well, I thought we'd say hi to Charlotte. And who else is
Tekla.
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 She's muted.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm getting used to this. I have some technological glitches here because I can't see you guys, but I can communicate with you. I'm like I got my one of my earphones in my ear, and I'm just communicating because I can't see you. I get your video, then I go dial up to get the audio, and I lose the video. So something's going on, and I need some technological advice, obviously. But
Well,
that's cool.
I'm glad you were able to get in.
Yeah, I am too.
Just saying goodbye to everybody, saying hi to people we didn't say hi yet, but good night to everybody else. Tekla, we didn't say hi, bye. Paul Becker, I don't know if we've ever met, but nice to see you here. And Charlotte. And just going across the screen, Cliff and Sibley, Mark, Charlie, Brian.
Which Brian?
And
You're the only
Sunday.
Brian on right now.
What? Clash already left?
Yeah, he's off.
We're gonna go.
I guess he turned himself back into a dog. You mean you've never seen
boy.
Family Guy?
Oh,
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah.
Got it.
Bob and I are gonna sign off.
The other Brian Griffin.
Now.
Good
Nice
night.
to see everybody.
Good
All
night.
right, goodbye.
Good night.
See you in 5 weeks.
All right.
Weeks.
I'll be in touch, Suzanne.